My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 41 years old. I live in Tallahassee, Florida. And this is the story of how a doctor's office became a war zone. Not because of what they found in my blood, but because of what I saw in my husband's hands. I remember the smell of the room first. That mix of latex gloves, cheap cleaning spray, and peppermint gum. The nurse had popped one right before checking my pressure. It was the kind of smell that sticks to the back of your throat, where fear hides before it finds words. She smiled too wide, like she knew something I didn't. But it was early and my stomach was doing somersaults, so I didn't trust any of my instincts yet. The walls were light green, the kind of green somebody must have thought would calm people down. It didn't. It just made everything look pale. The doctor's coat, the chart, even my own skin. There was a poster on the wall that said, "Every life matters," right above a faded chart about folic acid and fetal growth. I stared at that poster while the nurse pressed the Doppler to my belly, and then I heard it. That little thump, thump, thump that didn't belong to me. Fast, strong, like a bird's wings trapped behind my ribs, desperate to be known. I looked over at Darius, thinking he'd smile, thinking maybe, just maybe, he'd finally reach for my hand. He didn't. He was staring at his phone, thumb scrolling slow, his other hand resting flat on his thigh, fingers twitching like he wanted to say something but hadn't decided if I was worth hearing it. His wedding band caught the fluorescent light and flashed for half a second, cold, sharp, like an afterthought of commitment. The nurse said congratulations. I said thank you. Darius said nothing. She left us in that room with a beige folder and a heartbeat still echoing in the air, like it didn't need permission to exist. The door clicked shut behind her. The sound was small, but it felt like the world closing its throat. I turned to him, waited. That quiet stretched long enough for the clock to sound louder than breathing, and then he said it. "You should abort it." Just like that. No warning, no build-up, no checking to see if I was okay. He said it like he was confirming a dinner reservation, like the decision had already been made in another room, on another day, without me. My mouth didn't open. My eyes didn't move. I just looked down at his hands. They used to hold mine like they were scared to lose me. Now they sat there. Loose, careless, palms open like he had nothing to hide. I remember thinking, how can hands that used to pray with me now sit so still after saying something like that? My pulse jumped. My ears buzzed. The air felt thick, like the room had shrunk 2 sizes. The monitor behind me still hummed faintly. That little heartbeat sound looping back like a memory refusing to die. We'd been trying for 3 years. 3 years of charts, pills, appointments, whispered prayers, and quiet disappointment. I had tracked ovulation on apps, prayed with church sisters, swallowed bitter teas from my Aunt Maxine's kitchen in Quincy. I had cried in silence when another friend posted a baby shower picture. I had smiled at Darius through it all, even when his mouth twisted into that quiet, polite disappointment he didn't think I could see. And now that it had finally happened, he said to get rid of it. He stood up like the conversation was over, like a judge dismissing court. The chair squeaked under him, and that sound, small as it was, cracked something in me. I stayed seated, still, my body buzzing like a tuning fork, my throat dry, my palms damp, my heart trying to keep rhythm with something that had already gone off beat. I looked at his wedding band again, the one I placed on his finger in 2009 while my mama cried behind me. That ring looked smaller now, like it was choking the finger it used to honor. "I've got a meeting," he said, adjusting his tie like it mattered. I finally spoke. "Why?" He paused, not because he didn't know the answer, but because he hadn't expected the question. "You know we're not ready," he said. "The money, the timing, your job's still shaky." My job? I thought about the hours I'd picked up at the call center, the night shifts I worked when he said he needed time to study for his real estate license. I thought about how I'd taken on 2 clients doing remote data entry just so he wouldn't feel pressured. I thought about the secondhand crib I'd hidden in the garage under old Christmas lights, praying one day I'd get to use it. And I thought about how he never once asked how the prenatal vitamins made me nauseous before noon, or how my back started aching in places I didn't even know had nerves. But I didn't say any of that. I just looked at his hands. He turned to go. The air shifted with him, a quiet vacuum of everything that used to mean us. The door closed behind him, soft but final. And suddenly, the silence felt louder than the heartbeat on the Doppler. I sat there staring at the floor tiles. The edges where they met looked uneven, like the whole room had been patched together from something broken. I put my own hand on my belly and let the warmth settle there. No drama, no tears, just heat. That kind of quiet heat that tells you, this is a moment you'll never unremember. The nurse came back in after 5 minutes, pretending she hadn't heard. Her eyes were gentle, the way women look at each other when they know a private kind of pain is floating in the air. I asked her for a copy of the ultrasound photo. She handed it to me, her face softening like she knew she couldn't fix anything but still wanted to offer something that wouldn't bruise. I slipped the photo into my purse beside my house keys and a half-used lipstick. It felt heavier than it should have, like paper soaked in, meaning. I didn't tell anyone about the conversation, not my sister Brianna, not my mama, not even my best friend Cherie. Because once words like that leave a man's mouth, they don't just echo, they stain. I drove home with the radio off. The sound of the tires on pavement was enough. The world outside looked too normal. Kids walking from school, a man washing his truck, a woman laughing into her phone, all of it moving like my world hadn't just tilted. The sun was bright, but everything looked gray. My reflection in the window caught me off guard. I didn't recognize that version of myself, the woman holding her breath just to stay upright. I pulled into the driveway, sat there for a minute, and exhaled. Slow. Inside, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and faint old coffee. I hung up my purse, took off my shoes, looked around at the life I'd built with a man who couldn't even look at a heartbeat without flinching. I cooked dinner like usual. Fried catfish, mustard greens, cornbread. The rhythm of the kitchen helped. The sound of oil crackling, the spoon scraping cast iron, the timer ticking steady like a second heartbeat. I didn't cry. Didn't even think about it. My body was too busy remembering what peace used to feel like. He walked in around 8, kissed my cheek like nothing happened, said the meeting went long, asked what smelled so good. And I just smiled. Not a big smile, just the kind that says, noted. He sat at the table, scrolling again. Same thumb, same hand, same silence. He didn't notice I hadn't served him a plate, didn't ask why I was still wearing my coat, didn't see me slip the ultrasound into my nightstand drawer behind my journals and old church bulletins. He didn't know that silence can bloom like a seed when the soil is finally tired of being trampled. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The ceiling fan spun slow, its blades cutting shadows across the wall like soft reminders that time keeps moving, even when hearts don't. The space between us in that bed felt wider than the room. His phone screen glowed faintly. He turned his back. I turned mine. I rested my hand over my stomach and felt that small, quiet promise under my skin. Not fear, not shame. Just something ancient and strong rising through the quiet. Not because I was scared, but because I finally knew whose side I was on. I woke up before the alarm went off. Not from noise, from stillness. You ever notice how some mornings feel like they're holding their breath? Like the whole world pauses, waiting for you to decide what kind of woman you're gonna be that day? That was this morning. The kind of quiet where the air feels thick with possibility and grief at the same time. I lay there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling fan. The blades spun lazy, making that low whoosh sound that barely moved the warm Florida air. But it was enough to remind me I was still here. Still. breathing, still carrying something inside me that didn't ask to be voted on. Darius was still snoring beside me, mouth open, one arm thrown across the space where I used to sleep before I started curling up on the edge. I watched him for a while, the rise and fall of his chest, peaceful, unbothered. Like a man who had already made his decision and tucked it neatly behind him, somewhere he'd never have to trip over it again. The sheets were warm, but felt foreign, like I was lying in someone else's bed, in someone else's life. I could smell his cologne on the pillow, cedar and something expensive. I used to love that smell. Now it just made my stomach tighten. I slipped out of bed quiet, careful not to wake him. The floor was cold under my feet, the kind of cold that makes you feel awake in places you didn't know were asleep. The bathroom light hummed when I flipped it on. The mirror was fogged from last night's shower. His side of the sink cluttered with aftershave, cufflinks, and a stray tie clip. I brushed my teeth slow, staring at my reflection. The woman in the mirror didn't blink for a long time. She looked calm, too calm, like someone who had stopped arguing with the world. When I opened the cabinet, the prenatal vitamins were still there, tucked behind his shaving cream, like a secret I wasn't supposed to keep. I took one and swallowed it without water. It scratched down my throat, but I didn't flinch, just to prove to myself I could. By the time I came back out, Darius was sitting up, elbows on his knees, phone in hand, no good morning, no eye contact. "You still mad?" he asked, like we'd argued over the thermostat or left dishes in the sink. His tone was flat, not cruel, just careless, the kind of tone men use when they've already moved on from the moment. I didn't answer, just opened the closet and reached for the navy blue maternity dress I'd bought on clearance last spring. It still had the tag on it, $14.99, Ross. I'd hidden it behind my winter coats, waiting for a someday that never seemed to come. I hadn't told him about it, maybe because part of me already knew he'd never see it as hope, only as inconvenience. He rubbed the back of his neck, sighing like my silence was a weight he didn't have the strength to lift. "I'm just trying to be practical, Evelyn," he said. "You act like I don't care, but I do." That word, practical. He said it like it was sacred. He used it the way some people say responsible when what they really mean is afraid. Practical had built our house, paid the bills, planned the holidays, but practical had also emptied every dream we ever whispered at 2 a.m. I folded the dress, smoothing the fabric with my palm. Then I set it on the bed, like an answer I wasn't ready to speak. "I'm going to Mama's," I said. He blinked. "For what?" "To clear my head." He laughed. One sharp exhale, no humor in it. "You running away now?" "No," I said. "I'm just going somewhere my thoughts are allowed to finish." That's all I told him. No yelling, no drama, just the truth wrapped quiet. I packed one bag, 3 dresses, 2 pairs of flats, my Bible, and the ultrasound photo. Every zipper sound felt like punctuation. He watched me, leaning against the dresser like a man waiting on a verdict. "You're not making sense," he said. "We're supposed to decide this together." I paused, zipped the bag, then looked at him. Not his face this time. His hands. They were clenched now, not fists, but close, like he was trying to hold something in that was already slipping out. I remembered those same hands once resting over mine during a storm, steady, protective. Now they looked unsure of what to do when they weren't in control. I walked past him. He didn't stop me, didn't even move, just stood there, quiet, while I opened the front door and stepped into a morning that smelled like rain and possibility. Mama's house sat just outside the city line, where the oak trees start getting thick and the roads turn to cracked pavement. It had been years since I'd stayed there, not since the wedding. But when I pulled into the driveway, she was already on the porch, arms folded, lips tight, that look that could see through a soul before you even opened your mouth. "Something wrong with my baby?" she asked, not looking at me, looking at my stomach. I didn't lie. I told her everything, not in one breath, not in some big dramatic flood, just one truth at a time. While she poured sweet tea into mason jars and fried plantains in her cast-iron skillet without missing a beat, she didn't interrupt me, not once, didn't tell me what she thought I should do, just listened, the kind of listening that feels like shelter. When I finished, she wiped her hands on a towel, walked to the hallway and said, "You're staying in your daddy's room. Ain't nobody been in there since the funeral." That room smelled like old wood polish and time. The air was thick with dust and memories that hadn't been disturbed in years. His trophies were still lined up on the dresser. Baseball, church choir plaques, a fishing photo framed in fading gold. It all looked exactly how he left it. That night, I sat on that bed surrounded by his ghost. The floor creaked when I moved, like the house remembered every step I took as a child. I picked up one of his old gospel cassettes, Mahalia Jackson, 1987. The tape was worn, the label peeling. When I pressed play, the player hissed before her voice came through, soft, mighty, like comfort in human form. I looked at my phone. 5 missed calls, 2 texts. "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I turned the phone over and let the screen go black. In the quiet, I thought about Darius's hands again, not the way they looked, but what they used to do. They built. The crib we lost after the miscarriage. They pressed against my lower back when the cramps got bad. They cupped my jaw when I cried over another negative test. They used to be steady. Not perfect, but sure. But hands forget their purpose when the heart forgets its promise. I didn't sleep much that night. The baby, according to the app, was the size of a lime, somewhere between a whisper and a will. I rested my hand on my belly and whispered a prayer I hadn't said in years. "Lord, let me not be afraid of what's growing inside me." The next morning, Mama made breakfast. Salmon patties, rice, eggs cooked soft the way I liked them. The kitchen smelled like home and second chances. She didn't say a word while I ate, just watched me with those eyes that saw straight through pretending. Afterward, we sat on the porch, the kind that creaks under weight but never collapses. The morning air was heavy with humidity, cicadas buzzing in the trees. I held a cup of warm tea. The ultrasound photo sat folded in my lap. "You know what you gon' do?" she asked finally. I nodded. "I'm keeping it." She didn't cry, didn't clap or say hallelujah. She just took a sip of her tea and said, "Then you better start praying over your peace, baby, 'cause folks gon' try to talk you out of it." I knew she was right. That afternoon, Darius showed up, pulled up in his gray sedan like it was any other Saturday visit. He wore that crisp white polo he only put on when he was trying to look composed. From the porch, I could see his face tighten before he even parked. I was standing at the mailbox, the Florida sun sitting high and mean when he got out. He moved slow, like he was afraid to break something invisible between us. His hands were empty. No flowers, no bag, just car keys. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "Good," I said. "I'm not here to lose." He swallowed hard, stepped closer. The gravel under his shoes crunched like punctuation. "Can we talk?" "Say what you need." He looked down, then back up. "I panicked," he said. "That's all it was. I saw everything we still haven't done. The money, the house. I wasn't ready." I stared at the same hands that had held mine during our first ultrasound 5 years ago. The same ones that had thrown rice with me on the courthouse steps when we said forever. The same ones that once rubbed circles on my back after we buried our first dream of a child. And I realized something then. Readiness wasn't the issue. It was willingness. I didn't need perfect. I needed present. I didn't need a man with answers. I needed one who could stand beside me in the questions. He reached for my hand. I didn't give it. Not because I was angry, but because I was still listening for the silence. Still waiting to see if the hands that once built cradles could remember how to cradle trust. "I'll visit tomorrow," he said finally, voice low. "You can," I replied, "but not for me, for the baby." He nodded once, looked down, then back at me, like he wanted to memorize the version of me that wouldn't bend this time. I turned and walked back toward the porch steps. The wood creaked beneath me, familiar and forgiving. The ultrasound was still tucked in my back pocket. A quiet heartbeat printed in grayscale, and for the first time in a long while. I didn't look back. Mama had this saying when we were growing up. Some folks don't come back changed, they come back quieter. I never really understood what she meant back then, but I did the day I watched Darius walk up our porch 3 Sundays in a row, each time with softer eyes and nothing in his hands. Not flowers, not gifts, just himself. The first Sunday, the air was warm and heavy, the kind of Florida heat that makes everything move in slow motion. I saw him through the window before he knocked. He was standing there, shifting from foot to foot, like a man waiting on an answer he wasn't sure he deserved. Mama opened the door before I could. She didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. She just said, "Shoes off. Respect starts with dirt you don't track in." He nodded, bent down, untied his sneakers, and stepped inside like the floor might judge him, too. He sat on the couch across from me, hands folded tight, eyes fixed on the baby blanket I was crocheting, pale yellow because I didn't know the gender and didn't want to wait to love it. The yarn slid through my fingers, slow, soft, steady. It gave me something to do with the silence. He cleared his throat. I signed up for overtime," he said. I didn't look up. He shifted in his seat. The couch creaked under the weight of what he wasn't saying. "I started cooking more, too," he added after a beat. "Figured, if you're still going to do this, I need to show up different." He said it quiet, not defensive, not sharp, just plain. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because it was the first time he said, "If you're still going to do this," without the edge, without the blame wrapped in disappointment. The clock ticked slow. Mama hummed somewhere in the kitchen. He stayed an hour, maybe less. No hug, no kiss, just a quiet goodbye and a glance at the blanket, like maybe it carried his name hidden somewhere between the loops. The second Sunday, he brought groceries. He didn't announce himself, just walked in through the screen door and set 2 brown paper bags on the kitchen table. Spinach, salmon, almond milk, folic acid. He'd Googled. I could tell. He looked around like he wanted approval, but didn't know how to ask for it. I didn't thank him. I just moved the bags toward the fridge and kept crocheting. My fingers moved faster these days, tighter, neater, as if they were building armor instead of warmth. Mama caught my eye from the stove and said nothing. She let him stay long enough to drink half a glass of water before she said, "It's getting late," and he understood that meant it was time to go. He nodded, picked up his keys. When he left, he whispered something I almost didn't catch. "Take care of yourself, Ev." And for a second, it didn't sound like habit. It sounded like prayer. But it was the third Sunday that shifted something. The sky was gray that morning, the kind of gray that feels heavy but forgiving. He didn't knock this time. Came around back, through the garden, Mama still kept alive with prayer and Epsom salt. I was sitting under the old pecan tree, ankles swollen, hands resting on my belly. The air smelled like wet soil and magnolia. He didn't speak right away, just stood there, looking at the tree like it might tell him whether he was welcome. Finally, he sat beside me on the bench. Not close, but not far either. Just enough space for history to breathe between us. "I remember the day we picked that tree," he said. "You wanted cherry blossom, but they said this one would last longer." I smiled, faint. "I wanted pretty. You wanted roots." He chuckled. A real one this time. Not forced, just quiet and warm enough to remind me who he used to be. Then silence again. Not the cold kind that freezes a room, the honest kind, the kind that lets grief sit down and cross its legs without being told to leave. I looked down at my feet. My ankles looked like they belonged to somebody else. He noticed, too. "Let me," he said softly. Before I could answer, he knelt and began rubbing them. Gentle, careful, like the man I married was still somewhere inside his skin, waiting to be let out. The touch startled me at first, then it softened me in places I thought had gone numb. I watched his hands, strong, familiar, human. No ring. He'd taken it off, or maybe he never put it back on after that day. He looked up, and for the first time since that doctor's office, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't control, or fear, or shame. I saw regret. Real regret don't talk loud. It don't beg or promise. It just shows up quiet and asks to sit in the back until you're ready. He kept rubbing my feet in slow circles, head bowed, breathing shallow. "I don't know how to fix this," he said finally. "You can't," I said. "It's not broken, it's been rearranged." He blinked, the words settling between us like dust, catching afternoon light. We sat like that until the sun started leaning west. The air grew thick again, the cicadas screaming their evening songs while mosquitoes came out like tiny preachers testifying against stillness. He didn't ask to stay, and I didn't invite him. But when he stood up, he looked at my stomach, then at me. "What are you going to name it?" he asked. "I don't know yet," I said, "but it'll be something strong." He nodded, pressed his lips tight like he was holding back a memory. Then he left. No goodbye, no promises, just the sound of gravel crunching under his shoes until there was nothing left but crickets and my own heartbeat echoing against my ribs. That night, Mama knocked on my door with a bowl of cocoa butter and a pair of fuzzy socks. "Rub your belly with this," she said, "and your feet. Ain't no shame in softness, baby." I rubbed slow, whispering little prayers under my breath. The cocoa butter smelled like vanilla and safety. The baby kicked once, faint but sure, like it knew I was paying attention again. A few days later, Mama drove me to my second ultrasound. The nurse was new, younger, maybe mid-20s, with a butterfly tattoo near her wrist and glitter polish on her nails. Her voice was bright in that way people try to be when they don't know what kind of pain they're walking into. She spread the gel across my stomach, cold, slick, and said, "Okay, let's find your little one." The room filled with sound before I could even look. That steady thump, 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 fast, certain, like a tiny drum-keeping rhythm for my whole body. But when the screen lit up, I didn't look at the monitor first. I looked at my hands. One was resting on my belly, fingers curved like protection. The other clutched the ultrasound photo from last time, edges worn from being touched too much. I thought, this is what power looks like. Not volume, not violence, just presence, just staying. Mama smiled from the chair in the corner, her purse sitting in her lap like it had a story of its own. When the nurse printed the picture, Mama said softly, "That's God's heartbeat, baby. You can't convince me otherwise." Back home, the day felt too long for words. Mama went to evening service, said she needed to lay her spirit down on the altar. I told her I'd stay behind and rest. When the house quieted, I walked to the bedroom and pulled out the old wooden box from under the bed, the one I hadn't opened since before the miscarriage. Inside was our wedding album, dried rose petals from the bouquet I carried, a church program from Daddy's funeral, and a letter. The letter I never sent. It was dated 4 years ago, written in blue ink, smudged at the edges from tears I pretended were water stains. I unfolded it and read, "I still believe love is louder than loss, but sometimes loss teaches love how to speak up." The handwriting looked younger, softer. I didn't cry this time. I just folded it back, placed it beside the ultrasound photo, and closed the lid. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I picked up my phone and texted Darius. "You can come to the next appointment if you want, that's all." I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then came back. "I'd like that," he finally wrote. I didn't smile, not yet, but I didn't delete it either. I lay back, hand on my belly. The room was dim, the ceiling fan whispering the same lazy rhythm as that first morning, and then a flutter. Not sharp, not strong, just a shift. Like the baby was turning toward the sound of me, and I whispered, "I hear you too." The words sank into the quiet, small, certain, like roots taking hold. The morning of the next appointment, the air felt different. Not colder, just clearer. Like the sky had made room for something new. Even the birds sounded slower, like they were thinking before they sang. I stood in Mama's hallway, buttoning my cardigan, smoothing the hem that refused to stay flat. The floorboards creaked under my feet. Old wood, old stories. The kind that groans a little but still holds you steady. That's when I heard it. A knock, not loud, not timid, just 2 steady taps. I opened the door, and there he was. Darius. He looked different. Not in the face, but in the air around him. He was holding a brown paper bag, the top folded neat like it was something sacred. Inside was a bottle of ginger tea, a sleeve of saltine crackers, and a travel-sized cocoa butter with the label half peeled. His eyes searched mine the way you read a forecast, cautious, hopeful, afraid of rain. "I came early," he said. His voice was lower than usual, tired but clear. "Didn't want you to ride alone." Mama was behind me, arms crossed, head tilted, that look that said she could bless or block. It depended on what came out of his mouth next. "I'll drive," I said. He nodded once. Didn't argue. Just followed me to the car, careful not to walk too close, like even his shadow needed permission. The car smelled faintly of coconut oil and pine air freshener. He buckled his seatbelt without a word. The silence between us wasn't heavy this time. It was deliberate. Like we were both learning a new language and didn't want to get the pronunciation wrong. The clinic lobby was quiet. That still kind of quiet that hums under fluorescent lights. A young couple sat in the corner filling out forms. A grandmother read a wrinkled romance novel, her thumb marking the page with muscle memory. We sat 2 seats apart. I held the clipboard. He held nothing. His hands rested on his knees, fingers twitching. The kind of small movement that betrays nerves you're trying to swallow. When the nurse finally called my name, she looked at him and asked, "Just you?" I hesitated for half a breath, then said, "He's with me." We walked into that room together, not as husband and wife, just 2 people tied to something bigger than their bruises. The gel was cold again, that same sharp chill that makes your skin jump before your heart does. The monitor flickered to life, a swirl of blue and gray, waves like secrets moving underwater, and there it was, that sound, that heartbeat. Louder now, stronger, a rhythm that didn't care who had doubted it. The room seemed to inhale with me. The nurse smiled. "Would you like to know the gender?" Darius looked at me, waiting for a signal. I nodded. She turned the screen slightly, the glow soft against her face. "It's a girl," she said. "A girl." The word hung in the air like a prayer. I didn't cry. I just exhaled. Slow. Long. Like I'd been holding that same breath since the moment he told me to end it. Darius leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on the monitor. He stared like he was trying to memorize her. The curve of her spine, the flicker of her pulse, the proof that something he'd feared had dared to live anyway. Then he reached for my hand, and this time, I let him. Not because I forgave him, but because she deserved both of us in that moment. Even broken things can make a circle if they're willing to touch. When the nurse handed me the printout, her smile softened, and she said quietly, "She's got a strong heart." I almost told her, so does her mama, but I just nodded instead. We walked out into the parking lot together. The air felt lighter, like the clouds had heard something holy. We sat in the car, doors closed, the engine off. He didn't start it, just sat there, hands on the wheel, thumb tapping a slow beat, the same rhythm as her heart. "I was scared," he said finally. "I know. She's real now," he whispered. "She always was." He nodded, his jaw tight. "I want to try," he said. "Even if you never come back. I want to show up. I want her to know I was never absent. Just late." I looked down at his hands. They were trembling, not from weakness, from effort. He meant it, not in the way men say things to buy time, but in that shaky, raw way truth slips out when you're too tired to polish it. That night, back at Mama's, I unpacked the baby blanket I'd been crocheting. I laid it across my lap, the pale yellow catching the lamplight. Then, I reached into the bag and pulled out a new skein, soft pink. I didn't tell Mama right away. Didn't tell Darius either. I just started the first row again, looping one color into another, letting the yarn teach my hands what forgiveness could feel like. Because sometimes, growth isn't about starting over. It's about making space for what you didn't know you could hold. The next few weeks moved like molasses. Slow, thick, sweet in the middle, but heavy around the edges. I stayed at Mama's. Darius came by every Saturday like clockwork. He brought things now, not gifts, contributions. He fixed the leaky faucet in Mama's kitchen, painted the nursery back home, the one that had turned into a storage room after we lost the first baby. He took notes at appointments, asked about cravings, learned to fold tiny onesies without creasing the sleeves. He never asked when I was coming back. He just showed up, over and over, like someone who finally understood the assignment wasn't perfection. It was participation. I started watching his hands more than his words, because hands don't know how to lie. They planted, built, carried. One Saturday afternoon, I found him on the porch, sunlight cutting across his shoulders. He was sitting on the steps, a small block of cedar in his lap, whittling it with a pocket knife. The shavings curled into his jeans, pale and soft. He looked up when he heard me, smiled, shy. "Saw a video online," he said. "Thought I'd try to make her a rattle." I didn't tease him, didn't praise him either. I just sat beside him, the air between us filled with the sound of the knife against wood. Steady, careful, quiet love. That night, I reached for the cocoa butter on the dresser. The lid was loose, the scent of vanilla filling the room. As I rubbed it over my belly, my hand brushed against the ultrasound photo tucked in the drawer. I pulled it out, held it up to the lamplight. The edges were starting to fade, but her outline was still sharp. A tiny silhouette curled up like a secret too beautiful to keep hidden. I whispered her name out loud for the first time. Amira. It means princess, but I loved it because it sounded like a song, something you'd hum when the world got too loud. I didn't tell Darius, not yet. Some things needed to ripen in silence. The next Saturday, he came by again, same time as always. But this time, he brought a small box. He handed it to me without words. Inside was a necklace. Silver, simple, with a tiny charm shaped like two hands holding a heart. "I saw it at the farmer's market," he said. "Didn't buy it for you. Bought it for her. But I figured you could wear it until she's old enough." I turned it over in my palm. The metal was cool, smooth, the kind of gift that doesn't try to fix anything, just sits quietly where the hurt used to live. I didn't put it on, but I didn't give it back either, and he understood that. Before he left, he paused on the porch. "If you ever do come home," he said, "you don't have to come back the same. I just want you to come back as you." His voice cracked on that last word, but he held his ground. I stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, watching him walk to his car. He stopped once before opening the door, glanced back, and then drove off slow like he didn't trust the road to be kind. That night, I slept deeper than I had in months, dreamed in color for the first time since the doctor's office. In my dream, Amira was laughing, not crying, not reaching, just laughing. Full, bright, round-bellied laughter that sounded like sunlight spilling across hardwood floors. When I woke up, the morning light touched the edge of the bed, gentle, like a promise, whispering good morning. And I whispered back, "I'm listening." I was folding baby clothes when it hit me. Not a contraction, not a pain, but a memory. Sharp, sudden, like glass light catching on the edge of something you thought was gone. That day in the doctor's office came rushing back, every detail like it had been waiting for my hands to stop moving so it could remind me what survival costs. Darius's voice, that single word, abort. He'd said it like it was an option on a takeout menu, simple, disposable. And now, months later, that word still echoed sometimes in the softest places. The quiet between Amira's kicks, the creak of the rocking chair, the pause before I turned out the light. The tiny sock slipped from my fingers and fell to the floor. Soft pink, no bigger than a folded dollar bill. I sat on the edge of the bed and closed my eyes, my palms pressed into the quilt Mama made from old dresses and church scraps. The smell of baby detergent, lavender and something innocent, filled the room, and I could still hear that cold tone, detached, unbothered, like love had been replaced with logic. But louder than that memory was something new. Amira's heartbeat in my mind, a steady, certain drum, like it was guarding me from my own history. Mama knocked on the door, said dinner was ready, but I wasn't hungry. Not for food. I was hungry for certainty. For the first time in months, I realized Darius had been doing better. Showing up every Saturday, bringing things, asking questions, listening when I spoke. He'd even started bringing peach cobbler the way Mama used to make it. Too much nutmeg, crust breaking at the corners like it didn't want to hold in all that sweetness. But showing up isn't the same as standing with somebody. Presence isn't partnership, and consistency doesn't always mean conviction. He was there, yes. But was he with me? I needed to know what he'd do without the safety net of routine, without Mama watching him from the porch with her arms folded like a silent referee. So I made a decision. I was going home, not because I trusted him, but because I finally trusted me. The next morning, I packed my things slow. 3 dresses, the blanket, the ultrasound photos, and Mama's old jar of cocoa butter, the one that smelled faintly of hope. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, lips tight. Her housecoat fluttered slightly in the draft from the hallway vent. "You sure?" she asked. I nodded. Her eyes lingered on my stomach. Then she reached into the cabinet and handed me a jar of pickled okra and a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" She smiled. "List of things men forget. Read it when you get tired of explaining yourself." I unfolded it just long enough to see the first line. Number 1, who you were before them. I laughed through the lump in my throat, kissed her on the cheek. "Thank you, Mama." She didn't cry. She just hugged me longer than usual, long enough for me to feel her prayer sink into my shoulder. When I pulled into the driveway, I almost didn't recognize it. The grass was cut. The porch light was on. A new welcome mat sat in front of the door. It read, "Still home." The house looked familiar but changed, like it had been waiting for me, too polite to say it out loud. I unlocked the door. The air hit me first. Not his cologne, not my perfume. Just clean air, space, empty, but waiting. Darius wasn't home. I was relieved. I wanted the silence first. I walked through every room like a woman returning to her own memory, touched every wall, opened every drawer, not to find anything, just to remind the house that I was still here, still the woman who picked out the curtains, who prayed over the mortgage papers, who planted the jasmine bush by the fence and said it was for peace. When I reached the nursery, I stopped. The crib was up. The rocking chair sat near the window, a folded blanket draped over the arm like someone had practiced care. And on the dresser, a framed photo I hadn't seen before, a sonogram, centered, surrounded by notes written in his handwriting. First heartbeat, 137 BPM. Strong kicks, week 22. Name idea, Amira? My breath caught. He had known. Even if he hadn't said it aloud, he'd been building his apology with gestures too small to brag about. He'd been preparing in silence. I sat down on the floor beside the crib. My hands trembled against my knees. The light coming through the blinds painted thin stripes across the wall, shadows that looked like forgiveness trying to make its way inside. When he came home that evening, I heard the keys before the door. 2 bags of groceries in one hand, a bouquet of sunflowers in the other. He froze when he saw me on the couch. "I didn't know you'd be back," he said. "I didn't know either," I replied, "until I was." He set the bags down slowly, cautious like he was afraid of breaking the moment, walked over but didn't sit. "I've been thinking," he said. I waited. "No matter what happens," his voice cracked just a little, "I want her to know I was there. I want her to know her father learned how to stay." I looked at him. Really looked. The man who once told me to end her, now standing in front of me, eyes wet, shoulders lowered, like he was asking her for permission to remain. I reached into my bag and pulled out the necklace, the one he'd given me, the silver chain with the 2 hands holding a heart. It glimmered faintly in the lamplight. I placed it on the table between us. "You can hold that when she's born," I said, "if you're still here." He swallowed, nodded. "I will be." His voice was quiet, but it didn't shake this time. That night, I slept in our bed again, but not like before. The sheets felt cooler, the room larger, the silence softer. Not the kind that punishes, the kind that heals. I faced the window, my hand on my belly. I felt Amira roll beneath my palm like she was answering a question I hadn't asked yet. At dawn, I heard Darius in the kitchen, burning toast, cussing under his breath, trying to get the eggs right. I didn't go help. I just listened. The sound of a man trying. Later that morning, I took a walk to the park on Gaines Street, the one with the broken fountain and the swings that squeaked like old doors. The air smelled like rain and cut grass. Children's laughter floated across the lot like bubbles you could almost touch. I sat on a worn wooden bench, its paint chipped and warm from the sun. A father was pushing his daughter on the swing. She squealed each time he sent her too high, then begged him to do it again once she came back down. He laughed, that deep, tired, happy kind of laugh that sounds like home. And I thought, maybe forgiveness isn't a single act. Maybe it's a rhythm, a practice, something you choose over and over, like breathing, like parenting, like faith. The fountain sputtered behind me, half working, half stubborn, but still trying. I smiled at that. I reached into my bag, pulled out the ultrasound photo, held it up against the light. She was curled there, peaceful, like she was holding something too. Maybe the future. Maybe me. Maybe both. I whispered her name into the wind, Amira. And for the first time, it didn't sound like a hope. It sounded like a promise. The night the storm rolled in, I couldn't sleep. The air felt restless, thick with something unnamed. Rain started slow, tapping against the window like it had questions. Not loud, not angry, just persistent, like it was checking to see if I was still awake. I sat up, hand on my belly, feeling Amira's steady rhythm beneath my palm. The ceiling fan hummed above me, slicing the dark in slow circles. Thunder rumbled somewhere far off, that low sound that makes you wonder how close it really is. I got up, pulled on Darius's old hoodie, the gray one that still smelled faintly like him, and the paint from our last project together. The fabric was soft around the wrists, stretched thin but familiar. I wandered the hallway barefoot, the floor cool under my feet. The house groaned with the wind, boards shifting, roof whispering, windows sighing. It was a sound I used to hate. Tonight, it felt like company. I stopped outside the guest room. The door was cracked open. I hadn't asked him to sleep there. He just went, quietly, after dinner. Not in shame, not in defiance, just giving me space like it was a gift, not a punishment. The light was still on. A soft yellow glow spilled through the gap in the door, cutting across the hallway like a secret that didn't know where to hide. I leaned closer. Darius was sitting at the desk, shoulders hunched, face lit by the faint blue of his laptop screen. He wasn't watching sports or scrolling through headlines. He was staring at something still. Something private. A spreadsheet, maybe. A baby name list. Something quiet. His right hand rested on his chest, right above the place where his ring used to be. And for a moment, he looked small. Like a boy trying to remember who he was before pride taught him to protect his fear. He didn't see me. But I saw him. And I realized something. Regret doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like a man sitting alone, trying to rebuild himself without an audience. I went back to our room. The wind picked up outside, brushing rain against the windows like fingertips. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my journal. The pages smelled faintly of ink and old prayers. I hadn't written since I left Mama's, but the words came anyway. Not polished, not perfect, just real. "She moved again today," I wrote, right after he said he bought new paint for the nursery. Maybe she knows more than we do. The rain eased up. The wind softened. I closed the journal and placed it on the nightstand. My hand lingered over it, tracing the edge like sealing a promise. The next morning, sunlight peeked shy through the blinds, gold and tender like it wasn't sure it belonged yet. I got up early and made pancakes, banana, just like he liked. The smell filled the kitchen, heavy and sweet, wrapping around the quiet like an embrace. Darius came in, rubbing his eyes, hair sticking up in every direction. The kind of messy that happens when dreams won't let go easily. He stopped when he saw me at the stove. "You're making breakfast?" he asked. His voice was thick, sleepy. I nodded. He smiled, slow, careful. "I'll make the coffee," he said. We moved around each other like two people learning to dance again. Not graceful, not perfect, but with effort. With grace. He poured the coffee too strong. I burned one pancake. We laughed, just a little. And that sound, small as it was, felt like sunlight finally reaching a room that had been locked too long. Later that day, we painted the nursery. He'd picked out the color himself. Soft lavender, not too pink, not too plain. The can sat open on the tarp, the smell of paint sharp and clean, mixing with the faint scent of laundry detergent and baby lotion. He turned on music, old R&B, the kind that fills the air like a memory. Always and Forever played low through his phone speaker. He hummed off-key while I stood barefoot on the drop cloth, brush in hand, belly round under my shirt. Neither of us said much, but every stroke against the wall felt like a truce. The sound of the roller, the soft splash of water in the rinse bucket, the rhythm of two people rebuilding a world with color instead of words. We didn't talk about the doctor's office. We didn't talk about what he said that day. We didn't talk about the ache that lived between us for months. We just worked. And somewhere between coats, he touched my shoulder, just a fingertip, quiet, tentative. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not giving up on her." I didn't answer right away. The brush hovered over the wall, dripping purple tears. Then I said, steady and soft, "I didn't do it for you." He nodded. "I know," he said, "but I'm still grateful." That night, we ate dinner on the living room floor. No candles, no setup, just paper plates and old habits, fried catfish, collard greens, store-bought cornbread. The TV played low in the background, muted news anchors mouthing things that didn't matter. He glanced at me, then down at his food. "Do you want to name her now?" he asked. I didn't look up right away. I cut my cornbread, took a bite, swallowed. "I already did," I said. He froze, waited. "What is it?" I looked at him, my eyes steady. "Amira." The name sat in the air like a small light. He blinked once, then smiled, soft, surprised. That was my grandmother's name. I frowned a little. "You never told me that." "I was saving it," he said. "Why?" He shrugged. "Didn't know if we'd ever get here." I looked down at his hands, not trembling, not clenched, just open. And I thought, Maybe this is what grace looks like. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, just hands willing to hold again. The next day, we went shopping for the last piece, the rocking chair. I let him pick it. He walked through the aisles slow, tapping the backs of chairs, testing the creak like it meant something. Finally, he found one. Soft cushions, wooden arms smooth from wear. When he sat in it, the sound it made was gentle, a creak that sounded like Sunday morning peace. We brought it home, set it by the window in the nursery. The evening light spilled across the floor, touching the edges of the crib, the chair, the paint. That night, I sat in it for the first time, the wood warm under my hands, the cushion sinking beneath me like it had been waiting. Amira shifted under my ribs, a slow roll, a flutter like a sigh. And I thought, this is what stillness can build when you don't rush the lesson. Days started moving with rhythm again. Darius began leaving notes, little ones, tucked into my purse, slipped between Bible pages, stuck to the fridge next to grocery lists and appointment reminders. Appointment at 10, I'll be there. Save some of that ginger tea for me. I heard her kick last night. Strong girl. They weren't poems. They were presents. Tiny echoes of effort that meant more than speeches ever could. One morning I found a note in the mailbox. No envelope. Just folded paper with 6 words in his handwriting. I will never leave her again. I stood there for a long time, the morning sun pressing warm against my face. The paper crinkled in my hand as I reread the words, slow. Then I tucked it into Amira's baby book, right next to her ultrasound photo, right next to the proof that hearts can repair themselves when you feed them hope. That afternoon, we built the crib together. The floor was covered with screws and instruction papers neither of us wanted to read. He dropped a washer, cursed under his breath. I laughed, handed him another. Language, I teased. He grinned. She's not here yet. I got time to clean it up. When we were done, he stood back, wiping sweat from his forehead. Then he climbed inside the crib like a fool, grinning wide. She's gonna love this, he said. She better, I said, laughing. Took you long enough. He laughed too, deep and genuine. The kind of laugh that shakes loose what used to hurt. Then he looked at me. Not like a man begging to be seen, not like a husband chasing redemption, just like a man finally recognizing the miracle that stayed. He reached for my hand. I let him hold it. And this time, I didn't flinch. Because healing doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it shows up in small things, in the steadiness of fingers that used to tremble, in the quiet rhythm of 2 people breathing the same air without blame, in lavender paint under your nails, in the creak of a rocking chair, in the sound of a name spoken aloud in a house that once forgot how to speak love. Amira, she was coming soon, and somehow, after everything, we were almost ready. It happened on a Tuesday, one of those strange Florida mornings where the sky can't make up its mind. Half sunlight, half warning. The air was thick, humid, the kind that carries the smell of rain even when it's not falling yet. I was 36 weeks and 5 days. I remember because I'd been counting down the days in the little pregnancy app on my phone, marking each week with quiet disbelief. That morning, I was at Winn-Dixie, standing in the detergent aisle. My list was short. Diapers, detergent, wipes. The holy trinity of motherhood I was still getting used to. I was comparing 2 brands, trying to figure out which one smelled more like new life and less like chemical lemon when it happened. A slow, deep wave rolled through me. Not pain exactly. More like a shift. Like my body had decided it's time. It wasn't sharp or sudden. It was ancient. A pulse that started somewhere low in my back and wrapped itself around me until I had to grip the shopping cart just to stay upright. For a moment, everything went still. The hum of the freezer section, the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights, even the radio playing some 90s song about forever love. All of it faded. I closed my eyes, whispered her name like it might steady me. Amira. It came out like both a prayer and a plea. When it passed, I pulled my phone from my purse and called Darius. He answered on the second ring. I think it's time, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He didn't ask how bad or how sure. He just said, I'm on my way, and hung up. That's when the second wave hit. The drive to the hospital didn't feel like the others. It felt smaller somehow, like the world had closed in to make room for what was coming. The streets looked narrower, the stoplights too bright, the sky a swirl of gray and gold, like the whole city was holding its breath. Every bump in the road shot up through my spine and bloomed behind my ribs. Darius kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other on my thigh. His thumb moved in slow circles, tracing calm into chaos. No words, no radio, just the sound of my breathing and the tires on wet asphalt. Sometimes silence can be a language. That's what it was between us, the quiet kind that says, I'm here, even if I don't know what to say. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and nerves. Bright lights, voices layered over beeps. A nurse guided me into a room that felt too clean, too prepared for the kind of storm I was about to unleash. They checked vitals, hooked monitors, inserted IVs. I heard one nurse say, she's progressing quickly. Another murmured, early but strong. Darius paced at first, then stood still, then sat. Finally, he pulled a chair up beside the bed and took my hand. He didn't let go. Not when I screamed, not when my breath broke in half, not when the contraction monitor hit peaks that looked like mountains. His hand stayed right there, grounded, steady. The same hand I once doubted. Labor doesn't ask permission. It comes like weather. Wild, holy, and unstoppable. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time bent and folded. I remember the sound of rain against the window, the nurse's voice counting down, my own voice, half moan, half prayer. Then through the blur, I saw Darius's eyes widen. She's here, he whispered. I didn't believe him until I heard it. That cry, raw, wild, perfect. The kind of sound that splits open your whole life and rearranges it. They placed her on my chest, warm, slippery, alive. Her fists were tight, her breath frantic. She was small but fierce, like something ancient had returned, wearing my face. I looked at her hands first, tiny, wrinkled, strong, just like mine. I didn't cry, not then. I just whispered her name. Amira. It filled the room. It filled me. Darius leaned over and kissed her forehead, then mine. His voice cracked. She's everything. I looked up at him, exhausted, trembling, but clear. And for the first time since that day in the doctor's office, I saw it. Not pity, not guilt, reverence. He wasn't worshiping me. He was witnessing me. Later, in the recovery room, it was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels earned. The machines still hummed. The rain had stopped. The sky outside was soft gray, like the world was catching its breath with us. Amira slept in the bassinet beside the bed, her tiny fists tucked close to her face like she was still dreaming her way into the world. Darius sat in the chair beside me, hand wrapped around mine. His thumb kept tracing little circles again, slower this time. He looked at me like he wanted to memorize this. The three of us, the stillness, the proof that mercy exists. You saved her, he said quietly. I shook my head. No, I whispered. She saved us. We didn't say much after that. Words felt unnecessary. The silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It lived with us now. Gentle, honest, old. Like a witness who'd seen too much to ever speak carelessly again. When the nurse came to take Amira for her newborn checkup, Darius stood up. I'm going with her, he said. I nodded. Didn't even try to hide my smile. He followed the nurse out, shoulders straight, steps steady, like a man finally walking in rhythm with his own purpose. When the door closed behind them, I let go. The tears came, uninvited but needed. They weren't loud. They weren't broken. They were just release. I wasn't crying because I was scared, or even because I was tired. I cried because I had made it, through the silence, through the shame, through the moment the man I loved told me to choose less. And I chose more anyway. When Darius came back, Amira was wrapped in a pink blanket with a tiny knit hat. One of those hospital ones, handmade by someone who believes in kindness. He carried her like she was made of glass and light all at once, like one wrong move could break her, and one right move could save the whole world. He handed her to me, slow, careful. "She looks like you," he said. I studied her face, that small, serious mouth, that furrow in her brow. "She looks like hope," I said. He smiled, and something in his face softened. The next morning, we brought her home. The sky was clear, the kind of blue that feels like forgiveness. The nursery smelled like lavender and new paint. The crib stood ready. The rocking chair waited in its corner. Darius carried her in, paused at the doorway. He didn't move right away, just stood there, staring into the room like it was a prayer he was afraid to speak. Then, slow, he stepped forward and placed her in the crib. His hands lingered, tracing the rail like he was sealing something sacred. I watched him, still unsure, still learning, but not leaving. He turned to me. "I was wrong," he said softly. "Back then, at the doctor's office." "I know," I said, "but you didn't punish me." "I didn't need to," I said. "Life did that already." He nodded. No defense, no pride, just truth. Then he did something I hadn't seen him do in years. He bowed his head. Right there beside the crib, Darius whispered a prayer I couldn't hear, but I didn't need to, because when he lifted his head, his eyes weren't just softer, they were steady, grounded, and that's when I knew. We weren't just raising a daughter. We were rebuilding a home. The sun was rising slow the morning we brought Amira home for good. Not the kind of sunrise people post about. No streaks of pink or blazing orange, just a quiet gold slipping over rooftops, brushing through the pecan trees, warming the porch swing we hadn't sat on in years. The air still smelled faintly like rain. Somewhere, a mockingbird was trying out 3 songs at once. I stood at the front door with Amira in one arm, diaper bag on the other, keys dangling from my wrist. Her tiny head rested under my chin, warm and sweet with that newborn scent that's half milk, half miracle. The lock clicked before I could reach it. Darius opened the door. He looked different in that morning light. Soft eyes, unshaven jaw, a man both nervous and proud. He had moved the bassinet into our room, cleared out the old dresser that used to hold tax papers and takeout menus. On the bed, a folded pink blanket waited, smooth, careful, reverent. "I didn't know what side she'd like," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "So I put it by the window. Sunlight's good for her," I said. We laid her down together, watched her tiny chest rise and fall, that rhythmic proof that life, against all odds, had decided to stay. Neither of us spoke, not because we didn't have words, but because the words didn't weigh enough. Sometimes silence says everything. That week, Darius started writing in a notebook. He didn't mention it, just sat on the couch late at night, pen scratching quietly while the baby monitor hummed between us. I found it by accident, wedged between the cushions one afternoon while picking up burp cloths. The pages were messy, no titles, no order, just scattered thoughts, smudged ink, folded corners. Some pages were just dates, others were pieces of something closer to prayer. "Amira, your mother is the strongest woman I've ever known. You were born on a Tuesday, and I've been afraid of Tuesdays ever since. Afraid I'll never deserve another one like that. I almost made the worst mistake of my life, but you saved me before you even had a voice." I sat there for a long time with that notebook in my hands. Then I closed it gently and tucked it back where I found it. That night, when he fell asleep on his side of the bed, snoring soft, one arm draped across the blanket. I leaned close and whispered, "She's lucky to have you now." He didn't hear me, but maybe he didn't have to. A few days later, Mama came by. She walked in like she owned the place, the way only mothers and sunlight can. Her slippers made soft sounds against the floorboards. She scooped Amira into her arms like she'd been doing it forever, rocked her slow, hummed something low and wordless, a song from before my memory began. "She got your hands," Mama said finally. I shook my head. "No," I whispered. "She's got her own." Mama looked at me sideways, that little half-smile curling in the corner of her mouth. "Maybe," she said, "but they already know how to hold peace." We sat on the porch for a while, Amira sleeping in her little carrier between us, the one Darius bought online and put together wrong 3 times before he got it right. Mama sipped her tea, eyes on the yard, and said quietly, "You did good, Evelyn." The way she said it, plain, certain, made my chest ache. "I almost gave up," I said. She reached over, squeezed my knee. "But you didn't. That's the part that counts." The cicadas hummed, the afternoon light softened, and I thought about all the times I'd mistaken survival for luck. Maybe they were the same thing after all. That evening, I was standing at the sink washing bottles when I heard it. Darius's voice, low, off-key, familiar. He was in the living room, rocking Amira slow, singing one verse of an old Sam Cooke song that used to play on our wedding day playlist. "Bring it on home to me." I peeked through the doorway. He was barefoot, shirt wrinkled, eyes tired. But there was a peace in the way he swayed, a gentleness that didn't exist before. Amira's tiny hand was curled around his thumb, her body heavy with milk and trust. He glanced up and caught me watching. "She spit up on me again," he whispered. "She likes you," I said, smiling. He laughed, a small, hushed sound. "I like her back." Then he looked at me, really looked. "I like you again, too." I didn't flinch, didn't grin, just walked over, sat beside him, and leaned my head on his shoulder. The 3 of us breathed together. The air felt full. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes it just feels like steady breathing in the dark. That night, the house was quiet. The kind of quiet you earn after years of noise. Amira slept in her bassinet, soft coos escaping every now and then, like little sighs of gratitude. I got up and walked the hallway. Not because I was anxious, because I was grateful. I stopped in her doorway and watched her chest rise and fall. The nightlight painted her face in warm amber. I brushed a curl from her forehead and whispered something only she and God would hear. Then I stepped outside. The sky was velvet black, freckled with stars. The porch boards were cool under my feet. I sat on the swing and let it creak slow, back and forth. The sound mixed with the distant hum of crickets and the soft whoosh of passing cars. The air tasted like rain again, clean, forgiving. I thought about that office. The doctor's sterile smile, the faint heartbeat on the monitor, the word abort slicing through the air like a verdict I never asked for. I thought about how small I felt and how big I've had to become since. I thought about Darius's hands then, twitching, restless, unsure, and his hands now, steady, open, holding, both her and me without trembling. People talk about turning points like they're loud, like doors slamming or lightning striking, but sometimes they're quiet. Sometimes they sound like breath over a crib, like the soft squeak of a rocking chair, like the first sound a newborn makes after the world goes still. I looked back at the house. Light spilled from the window, warm, forgiving. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. I'd survived the silence, the storm, the breaking, and somehow what came after wasn't ruin. It was grace. I looked up at the sky, whispered her name. Amira. It felt different now. Not heavy, not fragile, just true. I smiled, rocked slow, let the night hold me. And before I went back inside, I said it one last time, not for her to hear, but for myself. I chose her, and I'd choose her again. The wind stirred the trees, the porch light flickered once, then steadied, and from inside I heard a tiny coo, soft, perfect, certain, like agreement, like gratitude, like the start of everything. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.